Okay, well, there's our cue to go ahead and get started. Again, welcome to our Time to Act Mental Health Echo. We're glad that you have joined us for today's session. We're really excited about it. As you noticed, we are recording today's session. We use those for educational and quality improvement, as well as we store those on our YouTube channels and websites so that you can go back and review the session if you have any questions about it or want to share it with any colleagues. If you've never joined an ECHO session, welcome to your first ECHO. They're a great way to learn from all these amazing people on the call, as well as get some useful information. We hope that you will ask your questions. We have a hub member. His name is Kurt Phillips. He will make sure that your questions get asked and answered. So you can just put those into chat. If we have time, you can raise your hand and come off mute and we'll get those answered for you. As always, we do talk about sensitive topics during our ECHO sessions. So please just remember to protect individual privacy. Don't share any information that could be we could identify somebody with. If you have any questions, go ahead and reach out to myself or a hub member. They all have an asterisk or will right now have an asterisk by their name, so they're easier to locate in chat. Key components of an ECHO session is that we will always have a presenter that talks to us about a specific topic, and then we will do case presentations. And not a lot of people love those case presentations, but once you stay on for a case presentation, you will always stay on for it because they are a great way to get information, share your resources with all these amazing people on the call. I know I have presented several of the cases of families that I work with, and I love getting those resources because then I can take those back to the families that I work with. So it just creates that professional networking. So when Stephanie Anderson shares something amazing that's happening down where she lives, I can then reach out to her and say, hey, can you tell me more information about that, or just also make that connection? If we were in person, that would be happening. So trying to create that professional networking and kind of connections in a virtual world is one of the key components of an ECHO session. We've all been on ECHO for what now seems like an eternity, so probably know how to rename our profile and raise our hand. If you, again, have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll help you through that. We always encourage you to pre-register. It gets information out to you sooner. It also, you can get on our newsletter that shares information about our ECHOs. So if you have any questions about that, you can reach out to Time to Act at aggies.usu.edu and we will respond to you. In order to get a credit of attendance, we do ask that you fill out a survey. And thank you to everyone who always fills out those surveys. They are a way that we take that information that you guys share with us back to our funders, and it's a way that we use it at our core teams to make any changes. So when you guys add recommendations on topics, those are the topics that then we try to add for our next year's sessions. Canvas is where we store everything. So if you would like access to our Canvas page, and I talked about those case recommendations, we always put those case recommendations on our Canvas. So you are more than welcome to go back and pull those. And then you get just a ton of resources and things to share with the families and clients that you work with. So far this year, we've created like over 700 recommendations from all of you guys that just are able to be utilized in everyday situations. So again, the case presentations are just a wonderful way to learn from everybody on this call. I love that part of it. But if you would like access to our Canvas page, just email again that time to act at aggies.usu.edu, and we will get you set up on that. A case study, if you are ever interested in doing a case study, hearing from your colleagues and getting those recommendations, please just reach out to us and we will get you set up on the calendar to be able to share that case. We do have a Facebook group where we're hoping to continue just some of that networking offline or off these echo calls. And so on Facebook, if you want to join that and start having discussions with everybody on that, that is wonderful. We do have a lot of social media that we promote and talk about our sessions, as well as any resources that people share with us that we want to make sure everybody knows about. I just want to thank you for coming to our echo session today, and I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Jett and Tyrel. I think I saw him come on, and they're going to talk about our topic today.
Okay, perfect. So we'll go ahead and just get started. If there's any issues with seeing my screen, just let me know and I'll go ahead and fix that. But we are going to be talking about how to navigate coming out with families as a provider. And first, let me introduce myself. My name is Jett or Jaylee. I go by both, and I use they, she pronouns. Tyrel?
My name is Tyrel Wild. I'm with Flourish Therapy. I use he, him pronouns. And as Jett has mentioned, we're very excited to work with you all today. We are hoping for this to be an engaging presentation. There will be parts where we ask for there to be discussion. I think in the chat is maybe effective, but also please feel free to come off of mute and share if that is a possibility with this Zoom. Yeah, we want this to be as interactive as you guys have questions. So
perfect. So just kind of a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about what exactly is coming out. We'll define some terms, kind of the whys and pros and cons of coming out, what you as providers have opportunities to do, and then some just takeaway and additional resources. And we'll leave time for questioning or questions at the end too. Okay, Tyrel.
yeah. So we were requested kind of to come back and visit you all. So we're happy that maybe our first presentation last year was good enough. And one of the questions that we had was like, how do families, how do we do this? If we ourselves are not necessarily the folks that are gay, how do we understand? And it may not just be with sexuality, but also with gender. And we're going to go through some of the distinctions there as Jett provides like an overview of our sexuality versus our gender. What we want to kind of focus in here at the beginning is the process of coming out, what it is, why it's even a thing. Ultimately, coming out as a process exists because society has these assumptions. Everyone is straight until they come out and say, hey, actually, I'm not. Or everyone is their gender identity based on social assumptions until we come out and say, actually, I'm not in this kind of assumption box that is assumed, and I want to share my authentic self with you. So it's not a one-time experience that people go through, again, because of that social aspect. Each time that I meet new people, it's like, hey, is this a situation where I'm going to come out or not? Is this a part where I share a part of who I am and change what is maybe assumed to be reality for me? So the coming out process is a necessity based in social assumptions. Hope that makes sense. If there are questions about that, you can be able to fire away. But that is why we have coming out in the first place, is because people need to declare, I am not the assumed.
The other
Jett,
thing that I like,
any thoughts on that? Yeah.
yeah, the other thing I was just going to add on with this is like identity exploration is an ongoing process, right? There's a reason we keep using the word process versus like something that is assumed as like a one-time end goal thing. Because one may come out as bisexual through life experience, really learn that, oh, actually, I'm a lesbian or actually, I'm gay. So coming out can also be a multiple time thing for one individual as they do that self-exploration, identity discovery, especially if you live in a society or in an area where identity exploration in the sense of gender or sexuality isn't encouraged.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll go to, maybe, there we go. So just a quick brief overview of like gender versus sexuality. People can come out both with their sexuality or both with their gender identity. So first and foremost, we're going to talk about sex. Sex is the chromosomal or genital expression as assigned at birth. This includes genital ambiguity for people who are intersex. And so this is like the XX, XY, and any variation of sex that can genetically and naturally happen. Then we're going to talk about gender. Gender is the expression of one's identity, not always in line with the sex that was assigned at birth. For a lot of people, this is. And if your gender identity aligns with what you're assigned at birth, we call that cisgender. If it does not align with that, transgender is an umbrella term, but there's a little bit more specifics within that as well. And then separate from that is sexuality. This is the gender or genders that a person is sexually attracted to. And then I just put a little did you know fact over there, which is the prevalence of intersex people has been estimated to be as high as 1.7%, or roughly as common as red hair or green eyes. So even on that biological perspective, there is more than just a male or female. There's intersex, there's the in-between. There's a lot of sexual expression that is different than the XX or XY chromosomes as well. Yeah. Anything you want to add there, Tyrel?
I would just say that it's important to note that like current ongoing political definitions from the like government agencies have been trying to I guess there has been some erasure of even intersex identities. There is an effort to bring sex and gender together and say, hey, by definition, these are the same things, which does not really allow room for non-binary, for transgender identities to exist, which is where we are seeing in the clients that we work with a bit of distress from a political environment being like, my identity is being erased because of the way that people are trying to define it. In clinical terms, we kind of are looking at the government, what the government is doing, and having to say, this is a limiting factor. And we can talk about that further as if people have questions about how to navigate that, how to be compliant with like federal regulations while also being supportive of clients, and how that overlaps with personal values. That's part of what we hope to be able to touch on today.
So moving on to this is we're just kind of talking about understanding terminology and pronouns here. Understanding terminology increases understanding and the ability for us to respectfully engage in dialogue on this topic. It can seem really scary to dive into something like this when we don't know all the terms and we really want to be respectful. So I did list a resource up there, which is the pflag.org/glossary. That's a really comprehensive glossary that defines a lot of these terms that you might run across relating to the LGBTQ plus community. And so just to touch on some of the words we might be using today and some basic terminology and kind of definitions of this. First and foremost, regardless of how a person identifies, it's always respectful and affirming to use their preferred terms and their preferred pronouns. So if a person says, I identify as a lesbian, use the term lesbian for them. If they say, I use they, them pronouns, use they, them pronouns for them. It's a very easy way to be respectful of the person or people sitting in front of you. Some commonly used terms for gender are cisgender, which I mentioned earlier. That just means the sex you were assigned at birth is aligned with your gender identity. Transgender would be if it's an umbrella term and it's one that's really commonly used, but that would be if your gender identity or your gender expression isn't in line with what you were assigned at birth. Then we have non-binary, gender fluid, and gender queer. I personally identify as gender queer, which just means that I have a gender. A lot of people assume I'm a woman, and I relate with a lot of those experiences, but I personally don't have a lot of ties to the idea of being a woman. That's a little bit insight to my gender relation with that. Some commonly used terms for sexuality are gay, lesbian, bisexual, pansexual, queer, asexual. I personally identify as queer. And then we have commonly used pronouns. We have she, her, he, him, they, them, but it includes more than just that. We do at the end of our presentation have a little infographic that explains more about pronouns too, but briefly, other pronouns include it is one I've seen, zir, z, there's a lot of in there. That infographic does a lot of highlighting what it is. If you have any questions about that, please feel free to put them in the chat. I can answer them. But yeah, also the PFLAG glossary does a really good job of explaining some of those less common pronoun usages as well as gender or sexuality identities. Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I just want to jump in with the terminology and pronouns and give my own little perspective on it. I agree with what Jett has said. And I also know that for some folks, this is like drinking from a fire hose, which we all know is not very easy to do. I just want to jump in here and say it's okay to take little bites at a time. And I want to reemphasize that the best practice is to be able to be respectful and use people's preferred terminology as they disclose that to you. An example, just in practice, this was literally yesterday. I was with a client and they said, "Yes, I'm Neptunic." And I was like, "That's great. I have no idea what that means. Will you please help me understand? I'll do some of my own research." I have no idea what that is though. And I was able to understand, oh, this is a sexuality where it's an attraction to all genders except for like male gender. And I was like, okay, that was something I never heard of before. Great. Thanks for the education moving forward. And I'll come across new things all the time. Some people may be like, why is so much terminology? Why is there so much? And I think that it's empowering for people to be able to find something that is a way of connecting to their lived experience. And that's not really something we can dispute or take away from them. Our way of being respectful is validating where they're at and being able to show them that they deserve to be authentic. So don't like feel like you have to understand everything and be an expert. It's okay to meet people where they're at. That's my little plug for this.
Thank you so much, Tyrel. And
Yeah.
absolutely, I agree. And like the same thing with Tyrel. I mean, I looked at my client list so I could talk about it. I have one cisgendered and straight client on my caseload, one out of 40 that I work with. And even sometimes, like Tyrel, I come across like, oh, I haven't heard that term for sexuality before. Or I haven't heard that term and how you relate to the world and to the people around you. So just respectful, ask for clarification where needed, and then educate yourself as well. It's not always the responsibility of the individual to provide all the education and knowledge for you. We'll provide a lot of resources to help with that educational piece, and hopefully what we talk about today also helps with that. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, why do people even bother coming out?
So we want this to be kind of a discussion for a moment. We're talking about how family members, how you as providers or family members yourself can like help navigate the coming out process. That's really what we're diving into, is coming out. And when Jett and I were going over our presentation, we were like, why do people come? Like, why do we even bother coming out? And we want to pose that question to you all. Why do you think that people would go through the process of coming out to others? Isn't it just more trouble than it's worth? Why do people do it? I would love to hear some thoughts in the chat, or if you're brave, please. Oh, Stephanie, you rose your hand. Yes, share.
Well, this is just a comment from our situation at in my home. So my daughter came out when she was 16 to certain people, and just like you have also, both of you have said. But when I said to her, you need to tell your grandparents, she said, why did my brothers have to tell them that they were straight? And I thought that was interesting that that was her take on it. But eventually she did, but she just made the comment. And that, like I said, this is just from her perspective, and our situation is, she said, I will tell people when I feel like I need to, but just like straight people don't go up to everyone and say, hey, by the way, I'm straight. She's like, I don't feel like I need to always do that too. But that was her in her very beginning of her coming out years.
Thank you, Stephanie. In the chat, I want to share out what Justine has said as well. One reason that people may come out is they're able to create a moment or an event to share their identity, which leads to empowering to be able to choose the timing for themselves. Thank you, Justine. Other thoughts? Why should we come out? I think what Stephanie shared is an interesting perspective as well with Stephanie's daughter and family experience. Well, did my straight brothers come out to grandma and grandpa? Why is it only queer or queer sexuality, queer gender people that come out? Lori from the Refuge says they want to be authentic. They don't want people to assume their identity in a world where the majority of people are straight. I agree. And I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here a little bit as well. Why would they do that if it's harder to come out, arguably? By coming out, I may experience rejection. I may experience judgment. Why do I still come out?
I think it's hard for them to live under that lid, keeping things trapped inside, how they truly feel.
Wow.
I'm just throwing answers out.
And I appreciate that. Thank you. I see that JC has a hand raised. JC, if you want to share, and then we'll have some other comments in the chat.
Yeah, I think this is it's an important question to consider. I think evolutionary wise, we all have a need to belong. That's where our safety comes. Even a biological evolutionary, we need to be part of a tribe. And so I think there's a lot of reasons people don't come out, which is the opposite of your question, because they don't want that sense of safety that Laurie's talking about. But I think at a certain point, one has to choose themselves over everything else if they're going to live fully authentic and be integrated as a full human being, to take such key and fundamental parts of ourselves and put them literally in a closet so no one can see them, maybe even ourselves, is not sustainable for a healthy mental space to live in, right? And that just, when you're spending a lot of energy trying to keep that door closed, then you don't have the energy to go out in the world and do all of the other things and have healthy relationships and all of that. So I think it's a desire to be whole and to be fully integrated as an individual within a tribe, which is tricky. I think that's where the tension is, right? If the tribe doesn't accept you, then what do you do?
Thank you, JC. I also want to highlight Annabelle's comment. Our gender and sexuality play into how we see the world, and it plays into our personal experiences. We want those that are closest to us to understand our point of view and our experiences. So we come out to connect and to help them understand us on a deeper level. I think that definitely goes back to that tribe, that closeness, that authenticity that's been mentioned as well.
Mhm.
I'm over here and I'm like internally wanting to sob and be like, oh, this is so great. I love this. Thank you. Other responses. I will move on here quickly, but I don't want to cut off anybody if you were preparing yourself to share a comment. Okay, in the chat, Curtis shared a reason to come out. Why do we bother? To change assumptions that have been made. So assumptions from others. Someone may think you can't be gay because you don't act gay, or that you must be gay because you do. Jett and I actually, we made a joke literally when we were talking about this slide, how I could come out here and be like, yeah, for example, I come out as straight because everybody assumes me to be gay because of my personality. And just kind of playing that up. Curtis, I'm glad that you brought that up as an example, that people can make some assumptions that we need to correct at times, to be like, hey, this is my lived experience, and I want people to understand that. Thank you. If others have additional thoughts on this, please feel free to continue putting them in the chat. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next part of this, which does build on this concept of coming out. Jett, did you have comments that you wanted to share before we kind of keep going?
No, I think it was well covered why people come out, and a lot of the time, and like for my work here too, it's really just that ability to connect to the others and to the world around you in an authentic way is a big part of that too. Yeah.
We kind of brainstormed here some pros and cons of coming out that we thought potentially could come up in this conversation. And part of the reason that we have this slide, the pros and cons here, is we want people to recognize there may be reasons that people choose not to come out, that it may feel safer to remain in the closet, to not engage with their authenticity. Some of the pros that in our discussion we've talked about: authenticity, our emotional well-being. I love how that comment about like keeping things in a lid or behind closed doors, that is so exhausting and draining to do. Cognitive dissonance is a term that we often use with clients to be able to talk about this loss of emotional well-being when they feel this one way, but society or other reasons are telling them that's not valid. And that conflict that exists internally, being able to come out and essentially own that part of who you are, it brings together or helps align a sense of self and provides more emotional stability. We came up with some thoughts that it's important for there to be visibility, for people to be out and know, hey, this is actually something that's normal. If we continue to put things in the closet, we're reaffirming that narrative that these particular identities are invalid. Some cons that we thought of: when someone chooses to come out, they may experience a rejection. They may experience loss, something that they can't control. They may experience physical, emotional safety risks. Coming out, that may mean that I am choosing to surrender some of my rights that aren't protected. I may be choosing to engage in discrimination because my authenticity doesn't have a protected status. There are some countries in the world that I have visited where my physical safety was a constant concern because as a gay man, I could be imprisoned for existing. And that's 2025 status, still countries where my existing is illegal. So these are things to keep in mind. Jett?
The only other one that we talked about that I wanted to touch on is that kind of normalizing piece of pros of coming out. Like, especially when we have like public figures who do come out, who express their gender identity or sexuality to the world, it does a lot to normalize. In the process of this and then everything, I ran across a statistic that the average age of coming out was actually mid-20s about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than 10 years, but now it's like 16, 17. So as we get more normalized and as we see these things, which are very normal things, be in the public eye, we're also seeing more people feeling the benefits of coming out versus the cons. Yeah, and I think that's the only thing I wanted to add there.
Thanks. And if at the end of these kind of lists, we did say others, if you notice some other pros or cons, please feel free to share those out that are just important for us to consider, especially when we're, again, the perspective we wanted to take with this information today is, how do you help a family navigate this as a whole? We want to understand where the individual is coming from. We want to understand the process of coming out. How family members should understand this, providers should understand this. We want to have an education, the language to it. Our next kind of step is to say, what do we do in the family situations? How can we help people? And that's where we're going to go. You want to go to the next slide?
So navigating coming out as a family. Tyrel, do you want to take this one on?
Sure. Okay, so the family systems perspective, shout out to JC. JC is our professor, and maybe I shouldn't have thrown you under the bus like that. It's fine. But the family systems theory says, hey, in society, the most basic kind of unit or tribe that one can have is a family. Now, there are definitions of what family looks like, and that we're not really going to dive into that too much. But we have a family system. Each person is born into a family system in some form. I want to acknowledge adoptions and other non-traditional kind of family systems, but people typically grow up in a family system. So when one person chooses to come out, they're most likely choosing to come out to the family as an important step. I don't even want to say first, because most of the teens that I work with, it's the friends that they'll come out to first, but we know that for teenagers, their peers, that is their main social system. But in a family system, this is where we're raised, this is where we get a lot of our values, this is where our safety is. Choosing to come out is potentially threatening the stability of that system. An individual comes out, the whole family system can kind of get disrupted. What I've realized in working with a lot of queer folk, and even in my own experience, is the individual who chooses to come out, they spend a lot of time making peace with this part of their identity before they choose to come out. They take that time to process. And when they're ready to share this, maybe there's excitement, maybe there's fear, but they have some sort of expectation, some sort of hope of how the coming out story is going to go. Maybe they're hoping that family gets to carve one of those rainbow cakes with them and say, yay, our child is queer. Maybe they're completely terrified. One solid recommendation we offer for you as providers or as family members is to normalize that it is okay for family members to take time to process this shift in their narrative. The person who came out themselves, they took time to shift their narrative, to shift that perspective. It's okay to allow time for the family members to do the same. Okay. Now, we also want to bring up the fact that the family system, as I mentioned earlier, that's one of the ways that we learn a lot of our personal values. Family system is a space to rear children, to help them become healthy, productive members of society, to help them grow into the beings that they're going to be. And as part of that process, we have our core beliefs and value system that is a lens that we view the world from. And sometimes one of the things that is hard is when two or more members of a family system end up diverging with that value system. It doesn't necessarily mean that this isn't a black or white kind of system. In clinical settings, we often talk about how black and white thinking is a cognitive distortion. We want to try and stay away from that. One way that you can help your family members that you're working with through the coming out process is by differentiating between personal values and supporting an individual's right to safety, to happiness, and authenticity. I love the notion of like Thanksgiving being this political war zone, and how there are tons of jokes in pop culture and stuff where the Thanksgiving dinner turns into a riot. Usually it's political reasons or potentially religious reasons. Yet those families choose to come together despite the differences that may exist. People can choose and find ways to connect and love, even when they have varied or different or potentially seeming opposing values. Try and help your clients exist in that grayscale rather than a black and white system. The next point that we wanted to bring up for you to consider for helping family members is that, and I think that it was, somebody already mentioned this. I'm so sorry, I don't remember your name. You shared out in vocally about your daughter's experience, but your daughter said, "Why do I have to come out to grandma and grandpa?" Right? And you were able to navigate that with your child in a way to be able to say, it's okay for my daughter to come out to grandma and grandpa if or when she chooses to. That is something that is super important that you should navigate with family systems as a whole. If you're helping them with the coming out process, it can be threatening at times if a family member outs the child or individual before they're ready. So if you're working with family members going through the coming out process, encourage them to respect the individual's right to come out when and to whom they choose. There may be reasons that they're choosing to wait or choosing not to come out. It's their decision when to be authentic with and whom they choose. Our last kind of bullet point that transitions us into the next point, or the next slide, is that it can be very important for us to also explore elements of control. What can family members control? What can they not control? How do we engage with radical acceptance? How do we engage with feeling powerlessness? Is that a word? Powerless? You know what I mean. But it can be very helpful to try and identify what is within our control, what is not within our control. Jett, do you want to go to the next slide or make additional comments?
Yeah, I think for the sake of time, we'll move on. If you guys do have any comments or questions, the chat or raising your hand would be fantastic. Just want to make sure we're respectful of the time that we have. And so to touch on this one is like, how do we support families as like a provider? And so, like, what is within your control as a provider helping families navigate coming out? And we listed creating a safe space. What does that mean? Creating safe space means use affirming language or the language the client or person in front of you is asking you to use. Promoting respectful dialogue, so having a basic understanding so we can engage in this topic respectfully. And then acknowledging your own shortcomings or biases. This is not calling out anybody in particular. We're all human. We all have biases. We all have areas of improvement that we can seek to use. So just acknowledge that there's maybe like a lack of understanding or not a lot of exposure. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging that. And then a willingness to meet your people or your individuals where they are at. If they are in the coming out process, meet them, don't force them. If they don't ever want to come out, talk about it, meet them where they're at. It is a very personal choice, like Tyrel emphasized a lot on that last slide, and we want to be able to respect all individuals of the family where they are at with acceptance in the coming out process. To be a little blunt about it, is providers, we don't get an opinion, you get a job when we want to do it right and ethically. This is not to mean that you don't have your own personal opinions or your own personal biases with this. We're saying as a provider, be respectful, show up in the ways you need to with your job, and do it right and ethically. A lot of professions, I know the social work profession in particular has a code of ethics which promotes this acceptance. Don't treat anybody differently based on their identities. And then a couple other comments on here is like elaborate how to support the LGBTQ plus community, be an ally, join in solidarity, learn how you can do that. Treat your LGBTQ plus clients and their families the same way you would treat any other clients. And at the same time, don't dismiss their queerness or avoid their queerness and don't shame their queerness. So they are human at the end of the day, regardless of sexual or gender identity. So treat them as human, but don't be dismissive or shaming that part of their identity. Tyrel, do you have anything you'd like to add?
You did wonderful. I'm not sure when our time ends. Was it supposed to end at 12:40? That would be awkward. Does it go to 12:50? Does it go to 1? I don't
We
know.
can go all the way up till 1. I mean, we just have some discussion questions afterwards, so.
Okay. I think that this is, if I'm not mistaken, our next kind of stuff is a few resources and stuff, but I do want to allow some space and time here, specifically as we're talking to you as prospective providers or family members, right? How do you engage with this? How do we be supportive as providers? We did intend to be a little bit blunt here. And I think that Jett did a really good job of navigating that space, being like, yes, you get your personal opinion. In your role as a provider, your ethical responsibility to provide safety and support for a client where they're at, that trumps whatever internal things we've got going on. Creating the safe space is a good first step. We know that the most effective ways to impact lasting change is to have intimate conversations on a personal level, for personal narratives to be able to affect change. JC, you have a comment.
I do, based on other conversations we've had over the last little while. And I cannot remember the source, and maybe you or Jett can remember this, but I think this plays into it. And there's this idea of a family's response happens on a continuum. So at one end of the FAR continuum is like pride and joy and queer joy and all of these things for their child to be authentic, and not every family is going to start there. Not every family is actually even going to arrive at the pride end of continuum. If we can get people at least to, like you're saying, the safety and the love part of the continuum, then everything else can take that time and that process that you have. It'd be unrealistic for us to expect all families to like just jump from this news to joy and pride. Some families are there because of their own dynamics and their own culture and all of those things, but at least can we get safety? At least, even if we can't get to what feels like love, can we get to safety? And I think that's important to understand on the continuum. Wherever your family that you're working with, they're going to be somewhere in there. And where they're at is not wrong. It's just where they're at. And that's where we start. So.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's really important to emphasize what JC did say, which is like ideally we would, and I say ideally as a queer person, ideally all families would be that over the top acceptance, love, celebration, pride, and joy of being queer. But that's not how every family starts out, and it can be really difficult for the queer individual themselves to give that space for their family to understand, learn, and grow in this process. And so respecting both ends, like a family might not be to that full acceptance pride part, and it's okay. It sucks, but it's also okay if that's affecting the individual too. So respecting where everyone is at, not just the queer individual coming out. Like for example, I came out to my mom in 2020, and it wasn't until about a year ago where I felt like we were maybe really getting to that pride place. So it really is a process, and allowing that space can be a fantastic thing for a queer individual to do, but it doesn't have to be something they have to do either. So
Just to reemphasize kind of those last points, your queer clients, they're just the same as any of your other clients. Most of the work that I do, and I'm in a very queer focused therapeutic setting. Most of what I do is just let's handle some work distress. Let's handle some family dynamics. Let's handle relationship problems and the anxiety or depression that comes about with that. And it's like I could be doing this with anybody regardless of gender or sexuality. People are people. That really binds us together. We have so many more similarities than we do differences. And at the same time, that last statement, our differences are some of the things that make the most beautiful aspects of humanity. If we as providers don't see or validate someone's queerness, if we aren't able to engage in that language with them because of our own discomfort, we are reaffirming to the client the only part of your identity that matters is the part that is not queer. And that is a harmful message to communicate. That's why it's important to engage with the queerness while not letting it be the only element of that person's identity that you see. Any thoughts or questions before we move on to just some resources at this point? Okay, I think Jett, we can go to the next couple slides, and I think we'll still have some time left for questions. So please, if you're thinking of questions or if you have thoughts that you want to say but aren't like, I don't feel like it's valid for me to share this thought here, I feel like it's taboo, we actually encourage you to feel free to share that. We want you to know this is a safe space to even disagree. That's okay.
So we also wanted to not only give you as providers resources, but things you as a provider can give family or to people in your life as resources. So these are some infographics we have on here. The first one talks about how to be an effective trans ally. The second one is kind of for that like workplace, maybe starting conversations. In this case, it gives you like the example of an email, but using and starting conversations in respectful ways to people's gender identity. And then we have gender specific and gender neutral pronouns. And that's the piece I was talking about earlier, where there's she, her, he, him, all of that. But then there's these other pronouns that you may run across too as well that people are using, kind of outlines how to use them. And then that last one is just the kind of do's and don'ts of being an LGBTQ plus ally. Tyrel, anything you want to add?
I think the only thing I'd add is start where you're comfortable. Take off the bite size little by little. Remember, you don't have to try and drink from the fire hose. Just take what you can. These are really good resources that I hope, Janelle, that we're able to get these to everybody. I don't know. And if we need to give you some sort of handout or something in a more digestible way, let us know and we're happy to provide that.
So I do
Yeah.
have your PowerPoints, and we will share those, and we have this slide on there. If you have these specific PDFs, I would be more than happy to share that with everybody as well.
Okay.
And I do appreciate you saying that, Tyrel, earlier about just if we have questions or if we disagree with something. And that leads me to ask this question, and I don't want to be ignorant about it, but I probably am. But how do you handle starting conversations and you're not meaning to be offensive, but that person takes it and you didn't know that they use different pronouns? I've had some situations like that happen, and I've in no way meant to be offensive to that person, but they hadn't come out to me or told me that this is the pronouns they use, and I didn't do that, and I almost got shamed myself because I didn't just automatically know that. That makes sense?
Yeah. Jett, do you want to respond? I've got a response, but I feel like I've talked a lot. Do you want to respond?
I think the biggest thing that I talk about here too with stuff like this is like, if you knew better, you would have done better in that kind of situation, right? Like if you don't know, then there's not a way that you could have use the pronouns that you needed to use. And it ties back to this kind of, as a society, we assume things about people, which is not necessarily anything to specific to an individual, because even me and Tyrel are a product of America, of our society, and there's some assumptions about gender. And even I mess up my pronouns occasionally with my clients. And the important part, I feel like, is the repair piece, which is we're going to mess up. You're going to use the wrong term. You probably use the wrong pronoun too. As long as you're able to be like, hey, I'm so sorry, and you repair in a way that makes sense to both you and that individual. I think is the most important part, regardless of the other pieces too, because you're gonna mess up. You're human. We make mistakes. It's okay. So, yeah, Tyrel.
Yeah, I emphasize exactly what you've said. Some of my clients, I have used incorrect pronouns, even in a space where it's like, hey, this is supposed to be the most safe space. You're my therapist, and you just used my incorrect pronouns. I apologize. I move forward. Now, I want to validate that some of my clients, that may have been the last straw for them, and they don't feel safe or trusted with me anymore. That is an okay thing. At the end of the day, I'm a space where I'm able to let them have those emotions, but at the end of the day, I have to give the emotions back to them, right? In therapy, sometimes I'll tell people, like, when someone gets offended, the person who is getting offended, they're the ones who have to sit with that emotion. It doesn't mean that we should all go around being assholes, pardon the French, but well-meaning, kind intents should not be a source of distress for you. Just like Jett was saying, if I'm trying and if I have the proper information, I will do my best, and I will make mistakes, and I'll take accountability for my mistakes, and then I'll move forward. If anything, I think this just reaffirms how much this has been socialized into all of us, that we just are adapting as we need to, and that's okay. It's okay to be kind to ourselves. You can feel confident if you are acting with respect and dignity and meeting the client where they're at, and then trying to take accountability for times that you mess up and move forward. I think it's important to notice that the reason that people may not have the emotional bandwidth to offer grace and forgiveness with mistakes, that's a result of minority stress and the amount of times that time and time again that they're trying to just fight for their authenticity, for their validity, and it's not happening for them. It's okay to understand where they're at too. I hope that makes sense, how it's both beings. In the chat, Luis, I want to highlight your question. You indicated that you've been confused by certain transgender responses, who seem stuck in their coming out and angry with a polyglot of verbiage. Can you describe some of the mental health and relationship issues? I may need a little more clarification with the request. Let me describe how I'm interpreting this and see if that lands correctly. So somebody's in the coming out process, and maybe they're like kind of in this cycle of trying out identities, or maybe like on a constant change of like, oh, I'm not using they them pronouns anymore. Now I'm using they their, and you're like, oh, I can't keep up. Is that kind of the situation you're describing?
Louise, do you want to answer? I don't know if you can come off mute and answer that question, or if you just want to put it in chat.
And Jett, I'm not sure if did you read that question or have a different perspective on that? I'd be interested what your perspective is too.
I interpreted it the very similar way to how you did, Tyrel. I am not looking at the chat currently because I'm sharing my screen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I will pull up a black box wherever the chat is for you guys, so you can't see part of the screen. So I'll just not look at it. But that's what I assumed.
Yeah. Describing the mental health and relationship issues. Again, I would want a little more clarification with that. But kind of my initial response is like, and I work predominantly with teenagers and their parents. And for example, I have a trans girl that I'm working with right now, and her mother, and the mom's like, she's just a dude. Like, she is just a dude. She's not really trans. And I kind of sit there with the mom and I'm like, yeah, you know what? That is a possibility. Maybe your daughter's just exploring her identity right now. And maybe there's it could be several different things that are contributing to this desire to explore her gender identity. And I validate mom's, mom has grown up with a son for 17 years. And I validate that it's like, again, we need time to process and kind of change our perspective. This is a huge shift in the narrative we wrote for our family and for our child. I then also am like, with the parent, either your daughter is going to explore this and get to a place where she understands, nope, this isn't necessarily what I was trying to figure out. This doesn't align with what I'm, with my identity, and maybe lands in a non-binary space. Maybe he comes back out and says, nope, I'm he, him, with he, him name, pronouns, so forth. Or your son is a daughter now, and that is their authentic self. Your responsibility, mom, is to provide safety, education, good structure. Mom feels like she can't discipline in the home because everything comes back to, well, you're just doing that because I'm trans. And we've done some work on, no. Mom, you get to parent still. This isn't a scapegoat kind of thing. But you don't get to associate parenting for like skipping school and say it is because you're trans. Like you separate out those things. Providing a safe space for a parent to for the parent providing a safe space for the child is healthy. In the end, the child is going to step into their authentic self, no matter what the process looks like. Lucy said, in part what you say, there's a lot of anger, depression, other diagnoses that you can look at. Mm.
The one thing, in respect of time, the one thing I kind of add to
Mhm.
that is a lot of the time I also see as like a therapist, part of the time they have the anxiety and the depression because they're not able to authentically connect to themselves and the world around them. And so when
Mhm.
we allow for the ability for an individual to express themselves authentically, a lot of the time we also see a reduction in anxiety and depression, at least in my experience too. And this is once again a reminder, just because someone is gay or trans, they are also human and they also have all the human things that can cause anxiety, depression, and other mental health concerns coming up. And so while it's important to recognize that that individual is queer in some capacity, it's not the only aspect of them that's important
Mm.
too, and navigating as a family.
Mhm.
And then really quick, we'll skip that. We talked about the gender unicorn a little bit last time, but here's just a list of additional resources. That first one's a coming out handbook, really, really good for people to understand the coming out process, as well as for an individual who's thinking about coming out to understand some of that. Then the second one is for coming out in different contexts, like such as in the work environment or outside of the family unit a little bit. I wanted to give some resources to providers in that regard. And then there's a list of recommended ratings, as well as the bottom one is particularly or resources for parents for their education and their support. Tyrel, is there anything you want to add as we wrap up the presentation today?
Not at this time. We're gonna see you all again next month as well, so we can we can catch up further.
And then here's our emails. If you feel that you have any questions that kind of expand outside of the time we have today, feel free to contact either myself or Tyrel, and we'll help you out and answer those questions, connect to more resources too.
Wonderful. And JC said that you guys were staying for our small discussions. Is that correct?
I actually have to head out today.
Okay.
I had a client who needs a session right now, so I will unfortunately not be able to stay.
Okay.
And the same is actually true for me. I feel like we're letting you all down, but we would love additional comments, questions. If we were hoping, one of my client canceled and then uncanceled.
Go do good
So,
things. Go do good things, both of you.
well, thank you. But please do share any questions that you have. If you all wanted to compile a list of questions, we could even spend our time next month continuing this, although we do have a topic for next month too. So whatever the group as a whole feels is best.
Okay, I was just going to say they will be in your small groups to answer any of your questions, because we do have, I thank you both for your time and insights on this. I think that everybody is trying to navigate it in the, like Jett, what you said, the best way that we know how, and hopefully by continuing education, we all do better at it. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So we're gonna move to our breakout groups, and hopefully the hub members each have these in their emails. So
Did you get my updates, Janelle?
yes, I did get
Okay.
your updates, and you sent that out to the large group too. So Heather and Stephanie, you're in one group together, and then Kurt and Jeff, you are in the other group together. And I can quickly email this out again, but the first question is really just and we're hoping to just again have this discussion of how do we create spaces at home, work, school, or in the community where the LGBTQ plus individuals can feel seen, safe, and celebrated during the coming out process. What are some common missteps well-meaning allies might make when someone comes out? And how can we respond more thoughtfully and affirming in these moments? And then what are some ways each of us can continue to learn and grow as allies to ensure that the support is ongoing, but not just during the coming out experience, but in the everyday lives of the LGBTQ plus people. So we're going to go ahead and go into our breakout groups.
Kurt did take notes, but I just want to say we had a really good conversation. I felt it was a really everybody contributed and we got into some nice things. I don't know how to summarize it. It was just a really heartfelt, open conversation about different perspectives and how we handle it. So you'll see it in the notes when they come out, but it was a great conversation.
Oh, good. Well, I'll call on Kurt then to say, give me an idea or two.
So I would say the overall conversation really had to, I think Jeff said it, that we need to treat each other like we want to be treated. We talked about how, as members who are not part of the LGBTQ plus community, how do we interact in a way? How do we let people know that they're in a safe place, that we're not going to be judgmental, even though our belief systems may be different? And there's some really good things Jeff and Annabelle both shared, that there's a heavy penalty to sharing sexual orientation or gender or whatever. There's a heavy penalty if you go into an environment that's not friendly. And so a lot of times people will go in a more guarded way until they know the person well enough to know that, okay, this is a safe place for me to be. And so I can share more about who I am. And I think that goes for everybody, whether it's around LGBTQ+, whether it's around religious beliefs, whether it's around, gender identity, whatever the case is. We're always going to be a little more cautious going in until we know the person well enough to know, okay, and we can share this about myself and those kind of more personal, private things. So that was kind of the overall, I think, tenet of it.
Great, yeah. And I agree. I think it's always about having those conversations. The more we have conversations that are in safe spaces, the more we can help everybody understand every different perspective that is out there. So I appreciate these opportunities for that. Stephanie and Heather, now I'm nervous to who I call on, who took notes. Who do I have to pick on?
All right, I will save you. It was me.
Okay, good.
So in our group, I think it sounds like we all kind of hit on some similarities as far as our conversation topics went. But some of the things that I feel like really stuck out in our group as far as our conversations and the elements that we touched on were the key pieces that we could maybe do both as far as creating those safe spaces, and then maybe some things that we might be more aware of that we could be as missteps, and then what we do going forward. First of all is just making sure that we are available. So making sure that there's openness and availability, and knowing that there are allies and resources so that those spaces exist. And then also just being aware of the fact that a lot of times those biases and things, they are there, and sometimes they come from our own experience or lack thereof, and that we can and do change over time. It's not a place that we have to stay. And so being aware of that and not placing people or ourselves into a box. And then speaking up. I think that was one of the ones that I thought was really fantastic, was sometimes silence is complicity. And that just being one of those people who is aware enough of yourself and others and where you're at and what is happening to not allow those kinds of things to go by without being a part of the conversation in a positive way.
Wonderful. Those sound like great things. And so send those over to the Time to Act at aggies.usu email, and we will compile those. Again, they're always on our Canvas page for everybody to go back and look at those resources. Thank you all for joining today's session, and we are right at time, so I won't keep us a minute over. Hopefully I can talk really fast, and our next session is in June 18th. So thank you all. Have a wonderful afternoon.